Hello everybody and welcome to another top 5 board gaming video. Today I'm going to be discussing games that are difficult to justify. Before I get started with it though, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at all of my various social media pages as well as my Patreon page. On all of those you'll be able to interact with myself and my channel in a whole bunch of really cool ways. So diving right into today's video about games that are difficult to justify. What do I mean by this is essentially these are the games that you look at them, you see them on the shelf, you see them online, you see people reviewing them, whatever it is, and you just think, maybe. There is something holding you back from wanting to purchase it. Whether it's a theme that you don't like but you love the mechanics or vice versa, a game that's overly large, very expensive, whatever it happens to be, it can be any number of things. This is a huge category and extremely personal for individual people. So I'm really curious primarily what you guys have to say. What do you all consider games or themes or whatever it is that are difficult for you to justify purchasing for yourself and or your gaming group? Please let me know anything and everything in the comments below, but with that, we're going to get started with my number 5. At number 5, I have The Legend of the Five Rings. This is a living card game where you're constantly purchasing new stuff is always coming out, but essentially you're just going against you and a single opponent. It's a relatively simple game to play, it's got some cool mechanics to it, but the thing is I just can't bring myself to buy it because it's one of those where once I get into it, I'm just going to have to keep going and going and going and going, and it's never going to stop. The base game is okay, and that's why it's so low on the list. Again, relatively easy to learn, you can play it relatively young and all that kind of thing, but it's just one of those where if you don't buy, if you don't keep up with it, then you fall behind. So, Legend of the Five Rings, my number 5. At number 4, I've got Time Stories. This is the investigation, deductive reasoning, logical thinking game where you're going and exploring through time to try to solve an overarching mystery throughout all of the different expansions. This game is great because each individual expansion has a wonderful theme to it. It's a ton of fun. It has a wondrous storyline and I absolutely love it. The problem is that you need a group. You need a consistent group and you need to meet relatively regularly so that people don't forget what all is going on in the game. If you can't make that happen, then this is a really tough game to get into because at best you'll be dealing with people who either haven't played the whole thing or are jumping in and out all throughout, or at worst you have people who just end up not caring and then you're left on a cliffhanger. So with that, Time Stories is my number 4. At number 3, I've got Star Wars, the X-Wing miniatures game, and this also extends to Armada as well. The problem with these games is similar to The Legend of the Five Rings. If you don't get the expansions, there's pretty much no point to it. The base game for this only comes with 3 ships, and so the problem is that that's all you can do. You can only ever have the 2 TIE fighters versus the X-Wing, and that's it. The thing is that the game itself is really well done, the mechanics are great, it's a little bit more strategic, like early teenagers potentially learning this at a relatively easy level, but the thing is it's higher up on the list compared to Legend of the Five Rings just because there is less to the base game here, and seriously, if you don't get expansions, you are completely screwed on this game. X-Wings Miniatures / Armada, my number 3. At number 2, I've got Gloomhaven. Oh god, it's heavy. So, the reason that this game is on the list is just because, well, look at it. The game is a monster. It's enormous, it's expensive, it takes a long time to play, it's a legacy game similarly to Pandemic or even like Time Stories and things like that. If you don't have a consistent group, then you can be very, very screwed over. However, the great thing about this particular game is that you can at least play it solo. So even if you don't have people to join you in playing, you can still go through the story and see what's happening within the game. And on top of that, the game itself, once you've done everything, it is a little bit replayable at least. Yes, you're going to know some of the plot twists and everything, but there are still some unique things that you can change up with it as you go back through. So, Gloomhaven, my number 2. At number 1, I've got another big daddy, Twilight Imperium 4. In this case, just like with Gloomhaven, it's a huge, physically large game, and like many of the other games on the list, you need a good solid group that you can play with at least reasonably regularly. If you don't have that, it becomes kind of difficult to justify the high price tag, and on top of that, unlike Gloomhaven, you can't play this solo. Even the minimum player count of 3 is really not very good. You really should have at least 5 or 6 people, and we're talking about a 5-6 6-hour game at the same time. And so that means you need to set aside an entire day, plan everything ahead of time, get people together. And on top of that, the game itself though, absolutely wonderful strategy, wonderful mechanics. I adore the game. It's great for older audiences, but at the same time, it's incredibly difficult to justify owning a copy if you don't have a plan ahead for it. So Twilight Imperium, my number one. Well, everybody, that's going to be it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video on my top 5 difficult to justify games. Again, this is a very, very personal thing, and you saw from my video, most of these things are very expensive and or require a lot of expansion or just huge. And that's really where I'm at with games that are difficult to justify, because I'm still essentially a student, so I don't make a lot of money, so it's tough to make these massive purchases. But at the same time, you guys know I love hearing from you all, and as I mentioned earlier in the video, I know that there are tons of different justifications for this, so please let me know what yours are. What games are difficult for you to justify and why? Let me know everything in the comments below that you'd like to say about it. But with that, thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.